Welcome. In this explainer, we're going to create a study guide on one of the most crucial topics in business, the relationship between partners in a limited liability partnership, or LLP. We're going to really break down their rights and duties. So here's our game plan. We'll start with a single most important document in any LLP, the agreement. Then we'll see how you even become a partner. After that, we'll dive into what happens when there is no agreement, looking at the default rules for money, power, and what happens when things go wrong. Okay, let's dive right into the absolute foundation of any LLP. We're talking about the agreement between its partners. Seriously, this is the bedrock of the entire structure. Think of the LLP agreement as the custom-written constitution for the business. It is a totally vital document that basically dictates how everything is going to run, from who does what to how profits are shared. It's the rule book. Now, what's really interesting here is the formal process. You can actually write up an agreement before the LLP even officially exists. But, and this is the important part, it doesn't become legally binding until after incorporation, when every single partner has formally approved it. Then, you've got 30 days to file it. And remember, this is not a set it and forget it kind of thing. The agreement is a living document. If you and your partners decide to change the rules down the line, you have to file those updates, again, within 30 days. It's all about keeping things official and above board. So, how does someone actually become a partner in the first place? Well, it turns out there are two main ways to get in the door. It's pretty simple, really. You're either in from the very beginning, your name is on the founding documents, or you're brought in later on. And if you join later, well, the rules for how that happens are spelled out in, you guessed it, that all-important LLP agreement. So the agreement is clearly Plan A. But what happens if partners just don't make one? Does the whole thing just fall apart? Well, no. The law actually has a Plan B. This is such a critical question for any student of business law. What happens when partners don't get around to creating their own rulebook? You don't just operate in a legal vacuum. Nope, the law itself steps in. This backup plan is laid out in a section of the law called the First Schedule. The best way to think of this is like the factory default settings for the partnership. If you don't customize your own rules, these are the ones that apply automatically. So, in the absence of a custom agreement, the law sets out some very specific rules for how money and risk are handled. Let's check them out. The default is, well, it's simple. Everything is split equally. Capital, profits, losses. Right down the middle. It doesn't matter if one person put in way more work or money. And get this, no one gets a salary just for being a partner. That's something you have to specifically agree on. And this perfectly illustrates the two-way street of responsibility. On one side, the LLP protects partners from normal business risks. It has to pay them back for legitimate expenses. But on the other side, if a partner causes a loss through their own fraudulent actions, they have to pay the LLP back. So who gets to make the calls when there are no pre-written rules? Well, the default settings here are actually very democratic. Here's the most crucial point. For most decisions, it's one partner, one vote. That's it. A simple majority is all you need to pass a resolution. But that simple majority rule has its limits. While day-to-day stuff is majority rule, the really big, fundamental changes, like what the business actually does or who the partners are, require everyone to agree. Every single partner has to be on board. So for our last section, what happens when things go sideways? The law provides some default rules for partner duties and how you're supposed to handle disagreements. These rules are all about transparency and loyalty. It's pretty simple. You can't keep secrets from your partners, and you absolutely cannot secretly profit at the LLP's expense, whether that's by running a competing business or using the LLP's name for your own gain. And what if the partners reach a complete deadlock? The default solution isn't to run off to court. It's arbitration. This is the official, legally required next step to solve the problem.
You know, leaving a business partnership is a lot like leaving a band. You can't just drop your guitar and walk off stage in the middle of a song, right? There's a process, there are rules, and believe me, there are consequences if you don't follow them. So today, we're going to break down exactly what that process looks like for a limited liability partnership, or LLP.
So you're thinking about moving on from your LLP. That's a huge step. But do you know the exact legal steps you have to take to make a really clean break? Look, understanding this isn't just good practice. It's absolutely essential for protecting yourself, both financially and legally, long after you've walked out that door.
In this explainer, we're going to walk through the 5 key stages of a partner's exit journey. We'll cover how you actually leave, the liabilities that can, follow you, how you get your money out, what you can and can't do afterwards, and finally, the super important paperwork that makes it all official.
First up, how does a partner's time with an LLP actually end? Well, it turns out there are basically 2 main pathways for this to happen. One that you choose, and one that gets chosen for you.
Okay, so the process of leaving really breaks down into 2 paths. The first is a voluntary resignation. Now, ideally, your LLP agreement already spells out exactly how to do this. But if it doesn't, the law has a default rule. You've got to give at least 30 days written notice to your other partners. The second path is involuntary, where your exit just happens automatically.
So what would trigger one of those automatic exits? Well, Section 24 of the LLP Act is very, very specific about this. Your partnership ends automatically under 3 conditions. First, if you pass away or the whole LLP dissolves. Second, if a court declares you to be of unsound mind. And third, if you've applied to be or are officially declared insolvent. In these cases, it's not a choice, it's a legal certainty.
Okay, so you've officially ceased to be a partner. You're done, right? You're free. Not so fast. This next part is absolutely critical to understand, because your liability, it doesn't just disappear the moment you leave.
Here's the deal. In the eyes of third parties, we're talking clients, suppliers, lenders, you are legally still considered a partner of the LLP until you take some very specific actions. Your personal decision to leave is just the beginning of the story. Changing the legal and public perception is what truly cuts the cord. To get rid of that lingering liability, 2 key conditions have to be met. It's a 2-step process. First, the public, anyone dealing with the firm, needs to have notice that you're no longer a partner. Second, and this is just as important, an official notice of your departure has to be filed with the Registrar of Companies. You can be held responsible until both of those things are done. And even after you've notified everyone, this quote from the Act really drives the point home. Leaving doesn't wipe the slate clean. You are still on the hook for any obligations the LLP took on while you were a partner. Your exit only protects you from new liabilities that are created after you've officially left. All right, let's talk about the money. I mean, that's what we all want to know, right? Once you've left, what are you actually entitled to get from the business you helped build?
So, assuming your LLP agreement doesn't say something different, the law outlines 2 key things. First, you get back an amount that's equal to the capital you actually put into the LLP. Second, you have a right to your share of the accumulated profits. But, and this is a big but, remember, this is a net figure. It's calculated after any accumulated losses have been subtracted.
Leaving an LLP also totally changes your relationship with the business. Sure, you gain your freedom, but you also lose certain rights and get placed under some specific restrictions. And these are all designed to protect the ongoing operations of the firm.
And here it is, the single biggest restriction. Section 24 is crystal clear. Once you are a former partner, you have 0 right to interfere in the management of the LLP, period. You can't influence decisions, you can't direct staff, or act on behalf of the business at all. Your role as a decision maker is completely 100% over.
We've touched on this already, but let's really get into the specifics. Making your exit official isn't just a handshake and a see you later. It's a formal process that requires a very specific paper trail filed with the authorities.
The whole process really boils down to 2 key documents that need to be filed. You've got to know about these. They are Form 6 and Form 4. And getting these right is totally non-negotiable. Now, it's really important to understand who's responsible for what here. The partner, that's you, has a duty to inform the LLP of any changes to your personal details, like a new address. You do that using Form 6 within 15 days. But when a partner actually leaves, the main responsibility shifts to the LLP itself. The firm has to file Form 4 with the registrar within 30 days of your departure.
And what happens if somebody drops the ball? Well, the law has teeth. Failing to file these forms on time can lead to a fine of up to 25,000 rupees, and that penalty can hit either the partner for not updating their details or the LLP for not reporting the exit.
This is such a great question, and it's a very real-world concern. What if you've done everything right? You've resigned, but the LLP just doesn't file Form 4? I mean, are you just stuck with that liability hanging over your head forever?
Absolutely not. And this is great news. The law actually provides a crucial piece of protection for the exiting partner. Section 25 gives you a really powerful fail-safe.
If you have a reasonable belief that the LLP isn't going to file the notice, you can take matters into your own hands and file it directly with the registrar yourself.
And here's how that process works. It's pretty simple. You file the notice yourself. The registrar then reaches out to the LLP for confirmation. But here's the best part. The LLP doesn't have veto power. If they don't respond within 15 days, the registrar just registers your notice anyway. This makes sure you can protect yourself even if the partnership isn't being cooperative.
So if we boil this whole thing down to one single critical takeaway, it's this. Leaving is a public act, not a private one. Your liability to the outside world keeps going until both that world and the official registrar have been formally told you're gone.
You know, the whole reason people form a limited liability partnership, or LLP, is for that limited liability protection. It's like a shield. But what you need to know is that shield isn't unbreakable. So today, we're going to look at exactly where the cracks are and what it takes to shatter it completely.
So let's get right to it with a scenario. Imagine you're in a business, everything's going fine, but then your partner does something illegal, like commits fraud. The whole promise of an LLP is that your personal assets, your house, your car, are safe. But are they? Does that shield still hold up? Well, that's exactly what we're going to figure out.
Okay, first things first, let's talk about what this shield is supposed to do. The fundamental appeal, the whole point of an LLP, is this protective barrier. It's designed to separate you, the person, from the business. So if the business has debts, creditors can't come after your personal savings. That's the core idea.
And this isn't just a concept, it's written right into the law. Section 21A says it all. Basically, just because your name is on the door as a partner, that alone doesn't make you personally responsible for the LLP's debts. That's the shield in action, giving partners that peace of mind. But, and this is a huge but, that shield is not made of indestructible vibranium. It has very specific weaknesses. So now, let's start looking at the first cracks, the situations where you as a partner can absolutely be held personally liable. And here's the first major distinction. It's actually pretty simple. The shield is there to protect you from another partner's screw-ups. So if they do something wrong, you're generally covered. But it offers zero protection for your own wrongful acts. If you're the one who messes up, you are 100% on the hook personally.
Okay, here's another crack. It's a concept from Section 29 called holding out. And really, it just boils down to this. If you walk like a partner and talk like a partner, the law is going to treat you like a partner, with all the responsibilities that come with it. So what does that look like? Let's say you tell a supplier, hey, I'm a partner here, give us a good deal, and they give the LLP credit based on that belief. Well, you can't just turn around later and say, oh, I'm not actually a partner when the bill comes due. The law is super clear. If you represent yourself as a partner, you have to accept the liability that comes with that title.
All right, so we've seen a few cracks, but now we're going to talk about something much bigger. We're talking about an act so serious that it doesn't just crack the shield, it completely shatters it.
And this is the single biggest risk you face in an LLP. We're talking about a situation where your liability flips from limited to completely unlimited. So what could possibly trigger something so drastic? What's the one thing that can destroy the entire shield?
Well, here it is, straight out of Section 30. The trigger is any act done with the intent to defraud. We're not talking about a simple business mistake or a bad decision here. We're talking about deliberate, intentional deception. That's the line, and when you cross it, everything changes.
And the consequences are, frankly, terrifying. As soon as fraud is proven, any partner who was knowingly a part of it is now on the hook for all the debts of the LLP. Not just some, all of them. Your personal assets are suddenly fair game for anyone the LLP owes money to. Poof, the shield is gone.
But wait, because having your personal assets seized isn't even the end of it. Unlimited liability is just the start. The law lays out some very specific, very severe punishments for anyone involved in fraud. This is where it gets really, really serious.
Think of it as a three-part punishment. First up, potential jail time. Anyone who is knowingly a party to the fraud can face up to 2 years in prison.
Part 2, the fines. And these are not small. They start with a minimum fine of 50,000 rupees. That's the floor.
And that fine can climb all the way up to 5 lakh rupees. This isn't just a slap on the wrist. These numbers are designed to be a serious deterrent.
And then there's the third layer. On top of the prison time and the fines, it's compensation. The guilty partners have to personally pay back anyone who lost money because of their actions.
So after hearing all that, jail, massive fines, compensation, the obvious question is there any way out? Is there any hope of a reduced punishment if you get tangled up in something like this? Well, the law actually does provide one possible path.
And here it is. Section 31 basically acts as a whistleblower provision. If a partner or even an employee comes forward with useful information during an investigation, and that info helps convict someone else, a court has the power to reduce or even completely waive their penalty. It's a huge incentive to expose the fraud from the inside.
Okay, so let's shift gears for our final point. We're going to step back from liability and touch on something foundational: what each partner is actually obligated to bring to the business in the first place. This is all about a partner's contribution.
You know, a partner's contribution is really their skin in the game, and the law is incredibly flexible here. It can be something tangible, like a building or equipment. It can be intangible, like intellectual property. It can be cold hard cash, or even just a promise to contribute cash or services in the future.
But here is the one non-negotiable rule. Whatever the contribution is, its monetary value must be properly calculated and recorded in the LLP's official accounts. This creates total transparency right from the start and helps avoid the kind of arguments that can lead to much bigger problems later on.